Travelling the Australian continent from west to east, we crossed the Nullarbor Plain. Here we were treated to Mother Nature putting on a visual show for us at the Great Australian Bight Cliffs. Hi, I'm John. In this video, I'll outline part 3 of our Trans-Australia road trip. In the Syd-WA-Syd standard range, we cover the journey back home from the West Australian town of Esperance, back through the outback, across the Nullarbor Plain to Sydney. We'll look at charging along the way and also highlights of the journey. The first day in this part of the journey, we travelled Esperance to Baledonia. We left Esperance and headed north to Norseman. On the way, we visited a salt lake. At Norseman, we stopped at the local showground and connected to 3-phase. 3-phase delivers 11 kilowatts, which adds about 75 kilometres per hour to the range. We went for a walk around town and visited a mining tailings wall. With our journey, we now turn due east and we headed to Baledonia. We connected to the 20 kilowatt DC charger there and checked into the motel. This was by far the most expensive electricity on the entire journey. Still, it's a fraction of what it costs to fill your ICE vehicle with petrol or diesel. The next day we travelled to the western edge of the Nullarbor, to Border Village. Called so because it's on the Western Australian and South Australian border. The Nullarbor area is littered with caves and vent holes. We stopped on the side of the road and visited the Kyguna blowhole. Air has been measured at up to 72 kilometres an hour venting from here. We made a quick top-up stop at Cockleberry and connected to the 3-phase. We were next to a cage with some eagles, rescued after being hit by trucks. Next stop was at Whyalla Pass, where we connected to a 21 kilowatt DC charger running on 3-phase out of a service station workshop. Charging at 21 kilowatts adds 148 kilometres range per hour. We arrived at Border Village, set up the swag and plugged into the 15 amp caravan socket. Next day, we intended to travel across the Nullarbor to Syd-WA-Syd. We got on the road to stormy weather. This didn't stop us enjoying the great scenery of the Great Australian Bight. Next stop was the Nullarbor Roadhouse, where we plugged into the 32 amp 3-phased while we enjoyed breakfast and coffee. We noted a couple of very wide load trucks along with police escorts. Back on the road, it wasn't long before we caught up to them. Arriving in Syd-WA-Syd, we checked into the motel and plugged into the Tesla 11 kilowatt destination charger. The next day plan was to travel from Syd-WA-Syd to Clare. We'd only been on the road for 5 minutes and we got stuck behind the wide load trucks again. Fortunately, with the UHF radio, we could hear the intentions of the pilot for us to pass.
Just back down a little bit more. This guy's, no, he's coming around now.
Arriving in Kimber, we stopped by a tyre shop and used the 3-phase out of their workshop. For the 2 hours it took to charge, we went and walked the town. Back on the road, we headed for Clare. However, we did need to charge somewhere on the way. We decided to detour via Whyalla and use a DC fast charger there rather than a slow 7 kilowatt AC charger in Port Augusta. This added about 40 minutes driving but saved us way more in charging time. The Whyalla DC fast charger was in the car park of the local vet. We got back on the road and the scenery was changing from the flatness we had seen the last few days. We saw the Garn train go by, which travels from Adelaide to Alice Springs. Arriving in Clare, we checked into a cabin at the local Discovery Park. we charged at the Tesla supercharger nearby. We had one more overnight before home, and that was to be in Hay. We headed to Berry and charged at a free NRMA 50 kilowatt DC charger while we had a brief walk by the Murray River. Back on the road, we followed the Murray River to Mildura. At Mildura, we used a free NRMA 50 kilowatt DC charger. We crossed the Hay Plains. The only DC fast charger in the area was out of action. Opposite, there were 4 11 kilowatt AC chargers you could use. Anyway, we checked into the motel and connected the car to the Tesla destination charger at the motel. The last day of our journey sees us travel back to our home in Sydney. We stopped at Wagga Wagga at a Tesla 250 kilowatt supercharger. Here we were clocking 170 kilowatts, which is a charging limit for the Tesla Model Y. We only had 7 minutes to wait before continuing our journey. Next stop was at Gundagai. Even though Tesla had 6 charging stores here, there was a 5-minute delay for one to become free. The only delay I was to encounter on the entire trip. I used one of the NRMA DC chargers instead that were on the opposite side of the building. Final charge before home was at Goulburn at a 120 kilowatt Tesla supercharger. So part 3 of our Trans-Australia trip saw us drive from Esperance in Western Australia back to Sydney. We travelled a little over 3,300 kilometres. Electricity cost was $292. Now that the 9,800 kilometre road trip across Australia is over, I'll combine all the learnings from this trip into another video. The topics covered will include things such as remote area charging, energy management, and also the effect of wind on the road trip. Join me on the next video.